So this was the first time that I had picked up the Bible to actually sit down and read for an extended period of time. And that really started me on my journey of not only back to the faith, but living the faith.
Welcome back into the Baptist Catholic Show, everybody, where we are sharing Catholicism with
Baptist fervor.
Baptist fervor. All right. So today we're excited because we have another guest interview. And this time, instead of a convert, instead of a member of the clergy, we have a revert to the Catholic faith, Mr. Micah Johnson. He's one of my colleagues. He's blessed that way at work. Director of Stewardship at the Cathedral of Christ the King. And so he was begging to get on this podcast, and here he is. So we're happy to have you, Micah.
Yeah, like you said, the dream of a dream come true. I can't wait.
Dream of a
I've also
lifetime.
never been called a revert before either. So I learn new Catholic words all the time.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, it's like you're growing deeper into the faith. I don't know, but words are words. We're going to find out. We're going to find out from the horse's mouth. So today, mostly what we want to do is just kind of get out of the way and let Micah unspool a little bit about his journey into the Catholic faith and tell him, or not into it, but back to it.
However you want to set it up.
Here, there, and yonder. So we're just going to let you go with it. And tell us a little bit about that and how you got to where you're at now, working for the Catholic Church.
Yeah, this will be great. This will be the one conversation that I talk more than Casey does in the whole conversation. I'm very excited about it.
Maybe. Yeah. I like that. Honestly, that's probably true.
Interject.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I grew up in the Catholic faith, as Casey said. Grew up on a 100-acre farm down in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. My grandparents actually lived on the farm as well. Went to Catholic school growing up, grades 3 through 8. So did that whole thing, did Catholic education, altar server extraordinaire, as passing it on to my son now as well. But yeah, it's, growing up Catholic in that, so my mom and my grandmother, who were the leaders of the faith in our little family group. My grandfather was, he didn't really go to church. So he would occasionally, he barely left the farm. So unless it was like out to Dairy Queen or get a watermelon, that was about the only reason he left. But my mom and grandma always took us to church each Sunday, myself and my sister. My dad would sometimes go. I thought he was Catholic as well. Growing up, we'll come to find out later that he wasn't Catholic that whole time. But he went a lot of the time with us and everything. My childhood faith was more of, a lot of rules. That's really what I took it for. But I'm a rule follower. Like, that's kind of my thing. It's like, you give me a rule, okay, let's follow it. That's fine. Especially at that early age. So to me, God was just a God of justice and a God of, vengeance. I can remember in maybe 7th, 8th grade, reading the book of Job and listening to all that Job went through. I was like, man, like, this is the God. It's like, I just listening to all this stuff. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh, wait, he was testing him. And I was like, I don't know if I could pass that test. So, but that's one of the moments that really stuck out to me, was reading that book of Job and thinking, man, this God is harsh. I don't want to make him mad. So that's really my view of God growing up. Not that loving God, but that God of justice and, more fear of, going against something that God would say. But yeah, so that's early childhood faith, went to youth group, went to that stuff. As I would not say that I learned a lot about my faith growing up. It was just one of those things that I did, and one of those boxes that I checked. In our household, we didn't read the Bible. We didn't pray together as a family. So we had one of those gigantic, gigantic Bibles that, like, you never cracked open because it had all, like, the family history about it in the front of it with the gilded pages and everything. So it sat in the family room that we never went into unless it was like Christmas or something like that. So yeah. And so nothing really, shocking happened to me growing up until it was my junior year in high school. We went to church, my mom, my grandmother, kind of like always. My dad stayed home, and went to church, went out to breakfast afterwards, came home. Everybody was kind of getting undressed, and my mother comes out of her room crying, and she has a note in her hand, and my sister and I don't really know what's going on, but the note was from my father, and it said, I'm leaving and I'm not coming back, and all this stuff was gone and everything. And we grew up in a household where there weren't a lot of emotions shared openly between everyone. So, I think my sister and I just kind of sat there shocked, like, okay, well, have no idea what to do now. And my mother just went back to her room to, try to even put herself back together. So it was one of those moments that just was completely out of left field, and it really started me down a path of walking away from the faith. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, but you start to think of God as a father, and it's like, wait, but I have a father, and he just walked out on us. So God, why did you let that happen? So it was one of those moments where you're starting to question things. It's like, how, why, what's going on? We didn't even see that there were issues in our family household. So that was when I was a junior in high school. Hid that from all my friends for a while, poorly. All my friends knew, but because you can only make so many excuses, like, oh, dad's out playing cards or dad's out doing something, for so long before they really figure out what's going on. But, that was kind of my friend group at the time as well. We didn't share a lot of deep, intimate details. We were, talking about what was going on at high school, or the test, or the sporting world, and things like that. So there was no real sense of community, or, even to know where to go, who to talk to about this very traumatic experience. When you think about that world that I grew up in, my view of a man was just what you saw on TV. The guy who provides for his family is just tough and buries all his emotions and is like a womanizer and all that kind of stuff. So that's basically what I did, was just like not talk about it, not even think about it, not even worry about it. And my father and I didn't even connect for about 4 years. After that time, it was when I was in college that my mom had said he wanted to reach out, and I was like, I don't even think I care at that point. And that really affected my view of God as a father during that whole time. And just as soon as I went to college, completely fell away from the faith. I would always, if you asked me, I would say I was Catholic, but my mom took me up to college that first Saturday, she stayed. So we went to church, and, I was living with a guy who was also Catholic, but, the second Sunday he didn't go to church. And I was like, wait, what's going on here? Like,
is this an option?
Is this an option? Exactly. So, I was a very introverted person at that time. So like being in social situations was always kind of like nerve-wracking. Like I could go to church, but I would go to church and leave. Like I'm not staying to hang around or talk to anybody or anything like that. So, never really developed that true sense of community at that early college life as well. So, it was the only the only mass I went to during that time was whenever I was back home visiting. So, it'd be college life, is no mass, doing whatever, and going back home, you go to church a little bit. And, the other thing that really happened during this time too, it's like, when I was 16, I'm a little older than you two Baptist Catholic people. So
what you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So, when I was, 15, 16, this is right when the internet is really starting to get kicked up and everything else. So
right posts typewriter.
Yeah, exactly. We still have those telephones on the wall that you use and everything.
To put it in perspective, the internet was started on my birthday.
Yeah.
Well, that's a little depressing statistic.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, for some of us, but hey, yeah, everybody's got those stories. So, yeah. So, I mean, you can imagine what happens when, a young teenage boy, gets a hold of the internet with no father in his life, no protections on internet security. So it was a very lust-filled life, very empty, shallow time there. And, that's one of those things once you get started with, it's hard to tear away from it. And, that was something I would deal with for, probably 15 years or so, because it was an easy release when don't know what's going on, you're stressed, you're just kind of mad at the world and everything. You turn to those things, and before you know it, you're hooked, and you don't even know how to get out or how to stop. So, it's one of those things that also dealt with very seriously during my college days as well. Yeah, there was no confession during this time either. It's like I probably didn't go to a good confession until I was 30 years old after that. So, it was a true falling away from the church during those times. Yeah. And so graduated college, slowly started talking back to my father again. We never had a good relationship after that. It was just terrible. He would try to make you feel bad with little comments every time you talk to him, just like picking at you. Why are you always at your mom's and not up here? And I was like, well, because you make it terrible every time I show up here to your house and everything. And, I just heard so much stuff like that happened right after that. Like he immediately moved in with another woman that, he was having an affair with. So it was just so much stuff that I couldn't even process at that time and everything. So, but, graduated college, and then, for me, it was just, what's the next thing? All right. You went to school, you went to college, you graduated, you get a job. Now what's the next thing? So, 25, got married. It was it was not a good situation. I was very immature, had no idea what marriage meant, what a true sacramental marriage looked like. That lasted 5 years and ended in divorce. Had that process annulled. I probably won't talk much more about that, but it was just another one of those things. It's like the next thing you do. So I was always looking for the next thing to do. And, when my father left, it was hard for me to get out of relationships, just because I didn't want to be alone during those times. So I was always looking for comfort, and, being by myself just led to that destructive behavior that, just this was not good for myself. So yeah, so had that marriage, actually got it annulled. The annulment process was actually a very healing process and made me deal with a lot of the issues of my father, a lot of the lust issues that I was dealing with at that time, and just was very healing. So then 2011, married Allison. So we've been married 12 years now. And that's really the turning point in my journey, where she was a cradle Catholic as well. She didn't quite fall as far off as I did, but when we met, we both knew we were Catholic, and we're like, well, maybe we should go to church. So we started going back to church together. And, even in the dating phase, you could tell it still wasn't the main priority for both of us, because, say we stayed out too late on Saturday, then, we're like, all right, we'll still try to go to the 9 a.m. mass. And then, like, as you sleep in, you're like, all right, there's 11:30, but 11:30 is lunchtime. So it's like, let's go to the 5. And then it's like, wait, who wants to go to the 5 o'clock mass when you go to work the next day and everything? Plus, then it's dinner time. So, those little rationalizations in your mind were there for both of us. And it wasn't until really got serious about it, our relationship together, that we started going back to mass. And I can remember going on vacation with her family. They always go to Atlantic Beach every other year. And her brother-in-law, so her sister's husband, is a convert to the faith. And, you always get to the beach on Saturday and they're talking about church on Sunday. And I'm like, we're on vacation. Why are y'all talking about church on Sunday now? They're like, well, it doesn't mean anything if you're on vacation. I'm like, wait. I thought my dad said there was like a dispensation when you're on like vacation or something. I'm like,
I think it's not a thing. Canon law somewhere.
Yeah,
it's exactly. On vacation.
Exactly. So my brother-in-law is hauling like a baby, a 2-year-old, and like 2 older kids, probably like 7 and 8 to mass. I'm like, Allison, I really think we gotta go. Like, we can't stay home. Like, he's taking all these kids. Like, what? We just can't sleep
terrible.
in.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. So, that kind of hit me. It hit me hard. I was like, man, this guy is really like, he takes his faith very serious.
Isn't that interesting? Sorry to interrupt, but isn't it interesting? And I'm sure you'll talk about this more a little bit later about how the break with your own father and the turmoil there caused the separation. But then a witness of a good father trying to invest in his family and make sure they're getting to mass started to draw you back into a more intentional practice of the faith. That's interesting. I didn't put that together.
And he's like the first person that I really started talking to about my faith again, because he took it so serious and everything. And just having that other male in your life to just bounce things off of during that time. He's been a real inspiration as I've grown up, because he has 6 kids now. 2 are in college. The one who goes to a very, we'll say a liberal college. There's like 6 Catholics on campus. He's the one that has the rosary hanging out of his pocket as he's walking around campus evangelizing people. And I'm like, I was not evangelizing people or even having a rosary on my body. I probably didn't even have a rosary in my apartment. Like when I was in college. So,
that's so cool.
When you see that, you're like, man, I want to talk to this guy more, because he raised kids like this that are living their faith. So like that. So we got married.
Sorry. That just goes back to a point we've made on the podcast before about kind of like joyfulness and holiness of being attractive. It's like, because if you just lay the options out on the table, you would think that doesn't sound that great or fun, but it's like, no, there's something about it. You're like, oh man. And of course, I believe it's because we're made in God's image and we're made for that. And so when you see it, there's something inside, you can't even explain it really, but it's like it pulls you like a magnet to it. And you're like, why are you that way?
Yeah, it totally was. So that was my first, real experience of that, strong Catholic family that was living the faith and everything. And that was, I think it was summer before we got engaged that we met him, because it was the next summer that I went to the beach, and we actually had our proposal on the beach. Mr. Phillips.
Sweet.
Yeah, exactly. So married
doesn't beat pajama pants by a Christmas tree. Let me just tell you.
Yeah. Do you even own frosted flake pajama pants, Micah?
You don't.
I don't think that's in my wardrobe. So
it's unfortunate.
Anyway.
So married 2011. First son was born April of 2013. That Lent, I started going through, I was like, we're doing this whole Catholic thing. Maybe I should actually read through the Bible. Or so I was like, so I started with the Gospels. Like that Lent, I was going to read through the Gospels. And it's the first time that I've actually in my life read through all the Gospels and I was like, wow, there's really a lot of stuff in here that's important, and a lot of wisdom. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I was like, I really like, I'd spent so much time in my life not not picking up a Bible or not reading about the Catholic faith. There's so much to learn. And so this was the first time that I had picked up the Bible to actually sit down and read for an extended period of time. And that really started me on my journey of not only back to the faith, but living the faith. There's one thing to go to mass on Sunday. There's another thing to actually live out your faith and in your family life and in the world. So, so that was that Lent. And, something happened to me, after Eli was born as well. You're reading through the Gospels and your first son is born, and you're in the hospital, you're holding them, and you're just like, man, this is just awesome. It's like that when you already love that kid so much. And one night I was sitting with him, this is after we got him home and everything, and it's like, I'm rocking him back to sleep. One of the few times I actually got up during the night. So I'm like,
oh, what's that? A baby? Trying to get a type 12, kid.
Exactly. And I'm sitting there. It's like I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, I do so much for this kid. And then you think about like Jesus dying on the cross, and you're like, man, if I was God, like I would have, like I'd have been down there, like knocking her off Romans off a cliff and everything else. We'd have thunder and hail and lightning. I'd be like, no, y'all get away from this boy. So it's like it hits you like what kind of sacrifice that Jesus made for all of us. And that was I can remember that very vividly as well. And just a couple other cool things that happened after that. We started teaching marriage prep at the cathedral. And we started teaching that in 2014. And a deacon and his wife were in the first like married life workshop with us, and they taught the section on prayer. And they gave an example of a couple who was praying together. Like that was one of the final things, was like, as a couple, give them an example of how to pray together, these newly engaged. And he did such a powerful job. He didn't really want to speak a lot during this, but he led this part, and it was amazing. You saw they gave their testimony of praying together, and then you saw the couples start to bow their heads and pray together, and it's like there was a peace and a stillness over that whole room. And like couples like were getting emotional. There were like people crying, and it was amazing. It like gave Allison and I both goosebumps of like what was happening and how the Holy Spirit was moving in that moment. And we were like looking at each other. We're like, we don't pray together like this. Maybe we should start that about something. So so it's you slowly walk through your faith life, and you pick up things like, you don't have to be living a perfect faith life all the time. And it's amazing when you start to step out into your faith, and you get active in your church, what kind of things and what kind of examples of people will show you to lead you to a deeper faith life. And that was one of those moments as well. It was Michelle and Lee Ferguson. They were it was awesome after that. So that was an experience in 2014. My dad actually passed away in 2014 as well. And, this will show you how far apart we were. My father never apologized for anything that happened growing up. So it was always left unresolved. And this was the first time I had been in a room when someone had actually died in front of me. It was my aunt, my sister, and myself. And you could see it was like it was the final moments. And inside of me, I felt nothing. It was a shock. It was a shock to me. I was like, wait, this is my dad. But there was just nothing. There was no emotion, no anything. And I was just like, well, there's that. So I guess now what's tomorrow? And it's really one of those greatest regrets, I have of my life, that I never even tried to reconcile with my father. But up until that time, there was still so much hate over abandonment that like I could never even move past it. And the pettiness that we both shared back and forth to each other was just, it's heartbreaking. It was tragic. I think back now and it's like, I could have at least, there's so many regrets now, but you're like where I am in my faith life now, it's like, he never had an example of that kind of faith in his life. I mean, he grew up under an alcoholic father, and you should hear some of the stories my grandmother would tell of just like being fearful and, just, so he never had a father figure. His dad died early in his life. As well, early in the life of their, I think he was still a kid. No, he wasn't. He was a little bit older, but I don't think I'd ever met my grandfather on that side because he died of alcoholism. And, my dad had a bunch of those own vices that I know that he couldn't deal with all the trauma that he had in his life. And, those vices that he had were his way of coping with it. But, back at that point, I didn't even understand that. That wasn't even on my radar. So that's another one of those traumatic experiences. And then 2015, our second son was born, kind of had that same experience of just love over another child. And this is about the time that Allison started going to adoration, sharing an hour with one of her people. And it goes to show you how, as spouses, that you continue to inspire one another. It's like, I kind of started moving deeper into my faith, and then she started adoration, and me being the good husband I was like, well, I can't let her have the only adoration time out there. I don't want her to get that Catholic on me now as well. So started doing adoration occasionally whenever she needed to fill in. But that was a very special time in my life as well, when you're actually sitting there in front of Jesus for an hour and just listening to him. And then 2017, this is really where things changed for me. I went to our parish has a Light of the World retreat. It's a weekend retreat where you go and people witness about about the faith life and everything. And I was still being an introvert. It still was very nerve-wracking for me to try to go to a retreat and be around all these, what you would think what I would say, right, was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to this really holy retreat. All these people are going to judge me. They're going to see what kind of sinner I am right off the bat here.
Which is true. But, hey, I wonder at this point, did you have any Catholic friends or acquaintances at all? Or were you just still kind of like doing it on your own? We started going to some of the marriage events at the cathedral. So the potlucks. Makes sense. We knew people, but we still weren't in a place where we would really, we would talk to them at that. And, there'd be Catholic things that pop up, but still you're not going up to somebody asking like, hey, how's your prayer life or anything like that. That's still not like one of the first. When's the last time you've been to confession, Wanda?
Yeah,
I have my doubts about what it's meant.
Let me just put it out there from like a hospitality for your parish perspective, like maybe don't do that still. Just go up around people and be like, how's your prayer life? Is it good? What's your name again?
The way you're living. No, yeah, I get it. So you didn't have any like instantiated like good friendships with Catholic folk yet. It was just more acquaintances.
Yeah, definitely more acquaintances. It's like, we saw them there and we saw them at church. That was really about the extent of it. And so 2017 went to this Light of the World retreat. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you go Friday night, get acquainted, do a little bit. And then Saturday morning, they hit you immediately with the talk is God is love. And the speaker was just amazing and talking about, God as a loving father. And I'm just like, man, this really sounds great, but it's not my experience. And right after that talk, you go into small groups. And didn't even really know any of these people in this small group. There's 2 deacons in there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say now? There's 2 deacons in this group. Like, this is going to be embarrassing. But I told some of the story about my father when they were asking, what hit you at that? And I was like, I don't really have this experience of God as a father like that. Just because I projected so much of my earthly father onto God, but God as a father. And at the end of our little breakout, this one guy, I didn't even know his name. Like, I probably couldn't tell you his name after the first part. I was like, who's this guy? Total stranger to me. He's like, I think we should pray over Micah and for Micah. And I'm just like,
Okay.
I don't know what you're doing. We did not do this in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Like, I don't know what you're gonna do here, but I'm keeping my eye on you. And the next thing you know, I couldn't keep my eye on him because there's so much like tears in my eye that I can't even control myself. I'm sobbing because he prays this amazing prayer over me about wanting to heal this father wound in my life. And I had just never experienced that much like love from a stranger before. And it was amazing. And from that, it changed my whole weekend experience, and it would just open me up to actually thinking about God as a father and about my own issues with my father. So that weekend, and then you go into small groups after you actually finish that, and our small group, Light of the World group, is still meeting since October 2017, and that's really the first time that I developed close Catholic friends that you were talking about your faith, your struggles, and you were being vulnerable with people, but you were also learning about your faith. That's the first time I experienced that, and that set me off into it. You talk about those leaps in your faith life. Your birth of your kid, and then this was that second one that really, you think you're living your faith, and then boom, you hit this, and you're like, whoa, like this takes it to a whole nother level, because now you have a community of people that you're sharing your life with and living your life with, and it's amazing. I mean, they know everything about you because they're living your life with you at the time. And it's just it changed both Allison and I. She went through the Light of the World the next year, and it changed both of us for so much of the better. And that Samuel praying over me at that retreat started the healing process towards where I could forgive my own father. I went into confession with a priest here and told him about it, and it was like, I was like, I have so much pent up rage and about my father leaving. I just can't get over it, and I can't. It's hard. It's hard for me to even pray for him or anything. And the priest said, "Well, think about your father's the way he grew up." And my father also came to our house one time, probably a year before he died, and he had 2 dogs, and it was such a nightmare. Like, he could barely get around, and like the dogs peed all over our house. It was so disgusting. And as I'm telling this priest this too, he's like, "Well, did your father ever have, a hard time communicating with you?" I'm like, yeah, you can say that, Father. Yeah, that's check the box. He's like, "Well, maybe that was his time of, wanting to be with you, wanting to say sorry to you, but he just couldn't." And I'm like, "Father, I don't really want to hear this, because then you're gonna, I just want to be right, Father. Now this is hard. You want me to
right
heal."
option.
And then, yeah, exactly. So that confession really, at the end, my penance was to write a letter to my father. And I got home and I started about 2 sentences of that letter, and I couldn't go any further. I was just like, no, I still don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. And it was probably, 6 months later or so after that, picking up the book of Sirach. I don't know what it was. It's like, it's another one of those probably Lenten things where you're like trying to get up early and pray and everything. And the reading was in the book of Sirach, and it says, Listen to me, your father, O children, and act accordingly, that you may be kept in safety. For the Lord honored the father above the children and confirmed the right of the mother over her sons. Whoever honors his father atones for sins and preserves himself from them. When he prays, he is heard, and whoever glorifies his mother is like the one who lays up treasure. Whoever honors his father will be gladdened by his own children. When he prays, he will be heard. Whoever glorifies his father will have long life, and whoever obeys the Lord will refresh his mother. He will serve his parents as his masters. Honor your father by word and deed, that a blessing from him may come upon you. For a father's blessing strengthens the houses of the children, but a mother's curses uproots their foundation. Do not glorify yourself by dishonoring your father, for your father's dishonor is no glory to you. For a man's glory comes from honoring his father, and it is a disgrace for children not to respect his mother. Oh, son, help your father. This is one that hit me hard. Oh, son, help your father in his old age, and do not grieve him as long as he lives. Even if he is lacking in understanding, show forbearance, and do not despise him all the days of his life. And as I'm reading that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's really everything that I did. I showed no forgiveness, there was no honoring my father during those last days of his life and everything. And it hit hard. Like it was another one of those healing moments where it's like, it wasn't just my father at fault for what happened in my life. He left, yes, but I had a part to play in this as well. And even my hurt could have turned into forgiveness had I let. But I hung on to that anger and that rage and that abandonment for so long that, he passed away before I could do anything about it. And it would be a very hard conversation now, but I think I could have that conversation. But after I read that, I wrote that letter that Father Paul had wanted me to write so long ago. And then, of course, after you write the letter, he wants you to burn it. And it was one of those really final healing moments that at least now when I think about my father, it's not just all anger. You finally start to have some of those, positive experiences, and those memories start to pop up in your life, in your mind again, because, for that 20 some odd years, it was just all negative. It's like, no, there's nothing positive about any of these experiences. I couldn't even remember, happy moments from my childhood with him. It was just all blocked by that rage and everything. So, yeah. So that's one of those. That was one of those healing moments in there that came because of this retreat that kind of set up to seeing God as a father and a God that I can talk to, a God that I can, share my thoughts with him. And, there's still moments where I question my faith sometimes. We've had 2 miscarriages in our lives. And the second one, I was so angry at God. I was just like, God, no, this is not right. Like, why have you done this? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are you doing? And I can remember driving to work like one morning. It's like, I was listening to Christian radio, and it's like, I hear the song come on, and I'm just like, it brings me to tears. And I'm just like, and I'm so mad. Like, I had to like sit in the parking lot for 5 minutes because I'm just like so mad at God. And like, God, if you're there, why is this happening? And, it takes time to get over that. But, there's still those moments in there where there's just so much pain to deal with. But you also have good Catholic friends who bring you meals or bring you a flower and everything to show that they're there for you and everything. And I have 2 boys, and I've always said, I've always thought, I don't know if I've always said it, but I think I have 2 girls in heaven because I always wanted a girl. And to this day, I think it's going to be, if I can manage to get my my butt up to heaven, then it'll be exciting time to meet those two children that are up there
Mhm.
and everything. And that's still one of those mysteries that's good to get with.
Mhm.
And I know lastly, Casey has to want me to talk about Exodus 90. The old men's
What?
thing.
Now talk about the third leap in your faith, which was primarily meeting me, but also going through the Exodus 90 program, which just turned your life around. No.
Yeah. So
because what's interesting about your story is I was putting the timeline together.
Mhm.
You were talking about some pivotal things that happened in 2014. I was thinking, wow, so this is going on in your life in 2014, and we're at the cathedral too.
Mhm.
Becoming Catholic, like coming into the church, but we don't meet until 2019.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me that we just, worked in different spheres for that long until that point. So anyway, men. So I wonder now, because now you are kind of a leader in men's ministry, and which is interesting too, given the story you just told, and I guess maybe has it been healing from that as the Lord kind of showed you the importance of investing in other men investing in you, and then you turning that around and investing in other men who want to strive after their faith.
Yeah, exactly. When we talk about Exodus 92, it's such a program with the aesthetics. And I felt like in 2019, I'd reached another little plateau point there, and I didn't know what was next. And I still hang on to that a little bit. Some men kind of need a challenge sometimes as well, and that's really kind of what I took this program as. But the small group of men that were meeting at 5:30 every Friday morning really grew my faith even more, because now I'm getting into a really small group of men who are doing something really challenging together, that are growing in their faith, that are really being vulnerable with one another. This isn't only about, hey, how's your prayer life going? This is hey, how's everything going in your life? Very deep stuff. And it's I'd never had that before to talk to. Even some things, you can share some stuff with your wife as well, but having another group that you can go to that is not judging you, that loves you, that's not afraid to challenge you as well.
Mhm.
You have so many people in your life that don't want to even challenge you at times, or call you out on things no, I really don't think that's right. And that's really what the Exodus 90 program, and meeting Casey and the other guys, where I'm still that's my group now. That's my guys that we can call each other, and we're always there for each other. And it's amazing. I've never, one of the other guys, he was well, you're either in your really Catholic phase, or maybe you've had a couple drinks, because now you're telling me you love me. And it's between a guy, it's I'd never told a guy I loved him before. And I was just man, you were my solid friend. You were always there. You're a rock. And I'm just and he's okay, so which is it, really, really Catholic? Something happened to you today, or have you had 2 drinks and now you're all going crazy? But that changed my life as well. And when you live when you have that father wound like that, you don't want other men to, or if they have experienced it, you want to be able to tell them a story about your life, and hopefully show them that things can turn around,
Mhm.
even if you're dealing with that anger and that resentment for so long, and all the other things that come with it, the lust and all that stuff that goes along with it. There is healing, but you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to have to turn stuff over to God, and that's hard. It's a lot of trust that you're you're putting in a being that you can't see. You can't see him if you look in those moments and everything. And that group has been amazing. We're still a group of us are still meeting now, 4 years later, and everything. And being a part of men's life, you can see the need and the desire for vulnerability for each other in this world that we live in now. And it's, yeah.
Well, and it speaks to something too, because, there are these caricatures of what, men are supposed to be or how they're supposed to act, what's true masculinity. And I don't need anybody, kind of like what you're saying. When you're younger, just bury stuff down and I ain't going to talk to anybody. That's weird. It's what women do or whatever it is, whatever excuse you want to give. But it's so interesting that, out of that Exodus 90 group now has grown. And we have had at the cathedral before, other men's ministries too. So it's not saying we had nothing ever, but now a more robust men's ministry, and it seems to be growing. It just speaks to that need. Because I was even a little skeptical about that part of Exodus 90. I was like, I don't want to sit around and talk to a bunch of bros and tell them, no, I didn't do my prayers this week. But quickly starting to realize that, okay, it's not what I thought it was. And yeah, I do need that. And, Aaron lets me get away with too much stuff. I need somebody else not to do. But yeah, I think it does. I think it does point to a need in our society that men need other men who are striving towards holiness. And because there's a whole lot of garbage out there on the right or the left or however, masculinity is about this or no, it's about this. And so it's like, what is true masculinity? Well,
striving toward holiness. Right?
Exactly. So I wonder too, we're getting kind of close to the end here, Micah, and your stories. Of course, I've heard it before, but it hits different every time. But I wonder if somebody's listening to this and they had a kind of a past that's pretty similar to yours, and a lot of people have those stories about a father wound or something a parent didn't measure up, and so that impacts the way they see God and their faith. I wonder if they're listening to this, what would be your advice? Somebody who is, I'm sure on a daily basis, in some ways you still deal with that and you have to take it to the Lord. What do you say to them?
Yeah. And I think you said a lot of it right there. Is you take it to the Lord. You have to develop a prayer life with God, and it wasn't until I really started having a deep prayer life with God the Father, where I can talk to him, raise up in prayer, all these things, good and bad, that I'm dealing with, but also to sit there and listen. It wasn't until, especially like reading the Bible, for me, I don't hear God's voice in my head. It's just, I haven't heard it yet. But if I'm asking for something from God, it's like, he'll speak to me if I will put in time with him, as I was talking about reading that book of Sirach. It's like, I was putting in the time and he's like showing me, wait, here's this. The Ephesians, or the letter to Timothy, speak not out of timidity. It's like, those moments have come in my life because I've set aside time to be with God. And even if I don't really know what I'm asking, it's there. It's time with him. It's reading the Bible, but it's also you have to get a community. You can't do it on your own. I spent so many years trying to white knuckle all this stuff, and it's too hard. You need a community. You can't be afraid to reach out to those people that you think are good people and living the faith, and those holy people. You have to surround yourselves with that kind of people. There's people in your church like that. Well, at least I hope there are. I pray that there are, because it really is what got me through everything. And so that's a couple of the main things. Is you gotta find your people. Like they're there. They're waiting for you. They may not even know it. For me too, going to confession and opening up to Father about some of those things that didn't want to talk about, but I got the words that I needed out of that moment. And it takes perseverance too. Like it's still, even as you hear my journey, like it took years to, even when I was living the faith, to get to a point where I could pray for my father now that he's passed away. Like, I don't know where he's at, but now I can pray for him. and there's been that healing, but that took years of perseverance and prayer and just slowly listening to God and allowing him to heal my heart and to have the trust in him that he would, and he wants the best for me and that he loves me.
And and two, I wonder, if you've experienced this, that pour out those emotions on the Lord, right? It's not as if you got to get your act together and then be all pious and ready before you can speak to God.
Right.
It's like speak to him out of the vial, out of the the deepest part of your anger and your wound and your frustration, like David did, like a lot of the folks in Scripture did. When it seemed like all hope is lost and Lord, why have you forsaken me? And all these good things. It's like, just go. Put yourself in that place.
Yeah. I mean, some of my most heartfelt prayers are those ones that come out of anger. And then, he ends up healing you out of those by just mentioning them to him. Like, tell him you're angry about it. Yeah. Tell him you're sad.
I had to that point, when I recently went to confession, I had a priest and he said, I won't say the expletive, but he said, now that you told me all those things, I want you to go in front of the Sacred Heart of Jesus window there. And I want you to tell all that crap to him. Just let it out on him. He can take it and he wants to take it. Just let it straight out to him. And it is, and it's awesome, right? It's awesome that, and unfortunately, like you experienced, like we've all experienced at some point, you have that caricature of who you think God is, or someone has given you the impression that he's like this, or that you have to act this certain way, or obviously, but that he can handle it. He's a big boy, turns out. Turns out. Well, all right. Thank you, Micah, for coming and being with us and being willing to open up and share your story. I'm sure it's going to bless a lot of people. And two, if you're listening to this and you really you connect with this, please share with it. If it's been a blessing, please share it with others, of course. And we'll wrap up with a prayer. We want to do that, and then we'll close it out. So, Micah, do you want to lead us in a prayer?
Oh, you want me to do it? It's your show, and you want me to do all the work.
I mean, when I have a guest, I just, it's all you.
Just do it. Yes, I'll be happy to. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, the Father, we thank you for Casey and Aaron, the ministry that they have to share the good news to all the followers that they have. We thank you for their gift of time and energy that they put into this. We thank you for the stories that are being shared, stories about real life. And we want to bring all this to you because we know that in our joys and our sorrows that you can do the most amazing things with all these trials and all these joys. You may lead someone else to Christ, but we have to speak. We have to speak into these wounds that we may have so that you can heal them. And we just thank you for this time together tonight. We want to pray for all those who do have a father wound out there and hope that there is healing for them, a father wound, a mother wound, whatever it may be. We want to pray for all those who are struggling in their faith, that they can turn to you, trust in you, and come to know the love that you have shown us. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
The Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
That's a revert that prays like a convert. Good job, everybody.
I bet you didn't have that line earlier. You're like, maybe I have this one. I don't know if I'll be able to use it. So, yeah.
That's right. I got to keep it in my back pocket. All right. Well, guys, thanks again, Micah. And of course, if you listen to this, you can join us back here on
The Baptist Catholic Show.